A Saudi Clasico last night saw Real Madrid beat Barcelona by 3 goals to 2. I'm delighted to say Graham Hunter is with us to try and give us some assessment of where Barca are at the moment in the Xavi revolution. I'm sure they're never happy about being beaten by Real Madrid, but there was a bit of spikiness and a bit of there was something to cling on to for them at least last night, was there?
No, it was much better than that, Ger. It was a classic Clasico. They've been a little bit bloodless over the last 2 or 3. They still lost. It's the first time they've lost 5 times in a row to Real Madrid since between 1962 and 1964. So it's a big number. They're out of a competition where there are medals and a trophy. It's a much better competition in terms of the format. It's great that it's in Saudi Arabia. After what that regime did to Khashoggi, the journalist, in the Turkish embassy. But the clubs will accept the money that's offered to them. They're all getting paid upwards of 6 million to be there, all 4 clubs, Atleti, Real Madrid and Barcelona. And last night's Clasico showed that it's a rarely spoken about phenomenon, but if you get your good players back, you play better. Do you know what I mean, Ger?
Well, just explain that, because go on, yeah.
I know. It's revolutionary. Ansu's been out, the youngest goal scorer for Spain, the youngest goal scorer in Champions League history, the youngest goal scorer in Barcelona's history. He's been out half a season. He was back. He scored again. Every time he comes back, he immediately scores. So there's a big deal now for Barcelona to see whether they can keep him fit immediately, not long term, but immediately. Pedri was back. In the meantime, I've been on your show raving about Nico and particularly Gavi. Immediately after I did the first time, Gavi was picked to play in the semi-final of the Nations League and stood out in a victory over Italy. And Nico, if anything, has maybe edged him a little bit in recent weeks because the two of them are absolutely exceptional. Pedri came back and just made them look like Ford Cortinas compared to a Rolls Royce. That's how good he is. You've had evidence of that over last season where he played so many games for club and country. When he came on in the second half, Barcelona were a completely different side. And irrespective of whether you care about their fortunes or not, particularly if you're just a neutral who wants to tune in and watch Barcelona every now and again, when Pedri plays football is a joy. So looking at it, and there were other really good supporting actors, if not best supporting actors, because they were all in white, the best supporting actors. That Araujo's performance was absolutely exceptional. Piqué was clever. Alves coped. Luke de Jong scored again. Frankie de Jong came off, and really, to be honest with you, if you had a button where you could press and activate the transfer market in the way you want to, Barcelona should cash in on both Memphis Depay and Frankie de Jong right now. And the key one, I don't know if you had time in your busy schedule to see the game, Ger, but I know your taste in football, and I think you'd agree with me that there's been a huge amount of appreciation for Dembele during the game and in the vast media coverage that Clasico commands. And Dembele is somebody for whom I've had a lot of interest and affection just watching him play, because he's startling. He's extraordinary. There are days when his pace and explosive eruption of acceleration and tricks and skills and shooting from distance make him at least Neymar-esque. And there are days when he looks like a competition winner. He was on the ball an awful lot last night and did next to nothing. And he's taken a lot of praise because he was the Blaugrana shirt that was the ball carrier an awful lot. He was often an outlet. And, you know, he looked as if his feet had been grafted on recently in large parts of the position that he had. And to my taste, it's more about quality than show or percentage time on the ball. So I find him an anomaly. I think he played like the man who's not sure if he's staying or going. He's at contract at the end of the season. There's absolutely no question that there remains at 24 an extraordinary footballer, an extraordinary athlete hidden in there. I don't think it's best that continues at Barcelona. Until last night, at least Xavi seems to think differently. They'd like to keep him. He is still, you know, somebody who, if you get right, it's a big asset. But overall, the headlines today are beaten with honour, Barca are back in Catalonia at least, and all the Madrid papers while celebrating Real Madrid's victory and move on to the final, which will be against Atleti or Athletic. All of them, plus Valverde, the winning goal scorer, and Ancelotti, the coach, speak about Barcelona's performance because it was the best this season by a distance. Had they played this way all season, they wouldn't be 17 points behind the league and they wouldn't be out of the Champions League. So perfect, no, really raw in that some of the players are just back from either injury or COVID. and there remains work to do in terms of clinical finishing. But a fabulous football match, and Barcelona played their part in it.
You mentioned the kids who've come through, Graham, recently, and I guess it's just been so unfortunate how they haven't managed to get them all on the pitch together at the same time. So that's a really interesting and exciting prospect over the next little while. What about Ferran Torres then, and his arrival at the club, and how excited Barcelona fans are for him in the short term?
I think they know, irrespective of the tuition that he got under Pep Guardiola at Manchester City, and irrespective of his frankly astounding goals per game record for Spain, they suffered playing against him when he was at Valencia. They know that this is a class act. You ask about the fans, I'd have to say I know him reasonably well. We've had 5 or 6 interviews, once or twice with a little bit of extended time to chat off camera. And he's a character. He's smart, he's ambitious, he's definitely a good pro, and the talent's there. Last night was a little bit of a surprise, given how long he's been injured and the fact that he's had COVID too, that he started the game. And halfway through that first half, you could see him rosy cheeked and a little bit struggling with the pace of the game. And he put a shift in, he put effort in. He was on the ball occasionally, and he showed for the ball. So positionally, wanting the ball under pressure, but also knowing how to make space for yourself. These are crucial assets if you're going to be playing for Xavi's version of Barcelona, at least. And by half-time, he looked pretty knackered. And I think we've got this time in training for him to come back into the side looking like the Ferran Torres that he really can be. But, they still have huge aspirations. I have no idea whether they've got either the wherewithal or the persuasive powers to get Haaland. But they're in the race. They want him. I mean, Arola, who I think was in hospital last night, Haaland's agent, is certainly talking to Joan Laporta. So if you think right now about the choices up front, whereby Ansu and Ferran and Abde, and at the moment Dembele and Ilias, and then you throw in Haaland. For Ferran Torres, he must be looking around himself and thinking, I've made a good choice here, because rather than at City, when fit and on form, he'll play most every game, I would say. Most football needs rotation. And behind him, he's got Gavi and Nico and Pedri and Busquets supplying passes to him. It's a prospect that I think strengthens Barcelona. He's the right character. I think that's a really big deal, because there are some still in the squad, and there are some who are departed now, who have not had the right character over the last years. Winning character, ambitious character, dedicated, understanding the philosophy character. Ferran Torres has it. So in the coming weeks and months, I'd expect that the weather check that you take every now and again will say, things are sunny at Barcelona for young Torres.
A, how have they managed to afford Torres? And B, how are they even in the conversation to potentially sign Erling Haaland?
First of all, lots of players have taken wage cuts. Piqué was the one who did the most dramatic. And when he showed his payslip on social media the other day, it was to combat an idea about how much a specific writer said this is how much the players are paid. And Piqué showed his half-year payslip, which was 2-point-something million. Now, we'd all love that if we could have that. But for him, it showed how much of a pay cut he's taken. And there have been mirror images by Jordi Alba, by Sergio Roberto, by Ter Stegen. But one of the devices that the financial fair play system, which is computerized for LaLiga, works, is that if you can lower the wage bill, particularly in the instant, then you have greater spending power in terms of who you can sign, who you can pay, and whether you can register them. So Umtiti took a longer contract, was awarded a longer deal till I think 2026, but agreed that because the contract was longer, he would lower his wages. So right now he's been paid gross and net less than he was a week ago. And that little piece of arithmetic allowed them to register Ferran Torres. They've shipped some players out as well. So when Coutinho left, that brought them close to the edge. He's not the only player that they've moved out. That brought them close to being able to register Ferran Torres, and Umtiti's effort made there. As far as Haaland is concerned, I think we're right to be sceptical both about their ability to afford him, but also their whether it's morally right when you're over $1 billion in debt. You're about to borrow another $1 billion to renew the stadium. But they're dedicated to the chase. They've shown themselves to be extremely quick at now, this regime, the new regime, which has been in 3/4 of a year, and Matteo Aleman, who was Ferran Torres' chief executive when he was at Valencia, is the guy who's making numbers crunch. So if you asked me to do a forensic accountant's job about giving you a spreadsheet about why they could afford Haaland, then I'd say politely, move on to the next item. But I don't think it's all bluster. I think that by summertime, I think that first of all they have borrowed enough money that they can make the bid that would trigger the release from Dortmund. It's about convincing the agent and the player, paying a huge sum. I mean, something ridiculous like 30-40 million to Haaland's father and to Minarola. These types of things are for a longer debate. They're sickening numbers if you think about it in terms of general society at the moment. But I don't think that it's only bluster. I think they think they're in the race properly. Then it's down to the footballer. He may have no taste whatsoever for being part of a rebuild. He may have no taste for whatsoever of facing a Real Madrid side supporting Kylian Mbappe. Equally, he may want to say, and I think this is part of the argument they're marketing, look how the world was transfixed by Messi versus Cristiano over the last 10-15 years. We're going to build that again, Mbappe versus Haaland.
And also the kids that you talked about at the start of this piece, like you'll be the tip of the spear. Look at the spear behind you is actually the greatest array of young talent. Now, they may not all go on to fulfil their potential, but who knows?
It's like Eoin and Ger is a great argument. If you're a striker and you're thinking about supply, he doesn't only feed off. He's not a traditional striker who only feeds from balls in the middle, as good as he is at attacking things aerially. He's a player who can drop deep, often does drop deep, and then likes a sprint on the counter if the ball is fed to him. And when you look at the service that's available to him, I think that's a good idea. What you've said will be part of the package. If you go to Real Madrid or City, you're probably going to be getting similar service, but it does put Barcelona on a parity of what they can argue to the Norwegian and say, look what it could be like for you. Think about grazing on this service.
I'm just going to hijack this whole thing for a minute here. The January sales have proven to be so far a bargain, or not, we'll see, for Steven Gerrard. 30% is what they're paying on the premium price for Philippe Coutinho. Is he worth it? Is he 30% of the footballer? Is he 50%? Could he get back to 80%? What's your take on this?
My take, Jerry, is that there's not a massive amount changed in Philippe Coutinho apart from his confidence, which took an awful battering from very early on, and therefore 4 years in, it was time for him, long overdue time for him to move again, although he spent a productive year in Bavaria. The other thing that's maybe changed is that he's not used to being a central figure, relied upon, which he wasn't the only one at Liverpool, but he definitely was somebody that the team looked to and put pressure on to produce the goods, whether it was a killer pass or whether it was a shot from distance. He was normally the end part of the product, or that was the most important part of Coutinho's game. These things haven't changed, but he's out of match practice. His confidence was shredded. He found, we all talk about expanding our horizons, taking risks with our creative powers, with our careers. When you do that and you bump your head on the ceiling and find, oh, there's my ceiling, it's not a pleasant feeling. And that's what Coutinho has been suffering at Football Club Barcelona. And it undercut him, undermined him, and therefore some of the decisions he made on the pitch showed that he was fragile in confidence. At Villa, he'll be relied upon. He'll be asked to do special things as long as he's fit. I think he'll be in the team. He has a very, very good relationship. Not just people talk about Steve Gerrard, but when Coutinho joined Barcelona, Gary McAllister was one of the people I phoned and asked. In fact, Gary previously phoned me to tell me he'd been asked me to look at a player, and when Coutinho was somebody who was just breaking through and becoming important at Anfield, Gary was raving about his personality, about his abilities, and saying that he thought way back when that this was a Barcelona player. So he's in an environment in Villa whereby I think that a person like Coutinho definitely does need to feel liked and needs to feel important. It's not the case with all sportsmen and women. It is with him. That will happen. Then an absolute guarantee that he produces, Chair, I think that's too big to ask. He is 4 years older. It has been a pretty debilitating time for his confidence. I use the word again because that's just a fact. So I think it's a good bet. I think there's a very decent chance that once he has 4 or 5 games, serious games under his belt, you begin to see a player that adds flair, that opens things up for Villa and scores from distance coming in off the left-hand side. So I think at the price, and given where Villa are at in terms of squad and quality, it's definitely innovated and excited the fan base. I don't think there's any question about that. So overall, right now, pound for pound, it's the right move. And by the end of the season, I think that on balance, you'll be saying to me, yeah, that's worked okay.
Last question for me is about Sevilla, and there's constantly links from their best players with the Premier League in this window. They're currently second in LaLiga. They're playing really well. They've got a manager who's restoring his reputation. Can they hang on to players till the end of the season and see where it takes them, or are the prices being bandied about so much that you expect that there will be significant activity there?
Yes and no. Yes, they can hold on to the best players to the end of the season because it's not obligatory that they sell. No, the prices aren't enough right now. I don't know how many other rumours you've seen over there, but I know that Newcastle genuinely do want Diego Carlos. It's the wrong club for him to go to. I don't believe that only money will motivate him to leave, and they're far short. I mean, the buyout clause is above 80 million. Now, at the moment, clubs, because things are so tight, clubs are tending not to insist on the absolute maximum buyout. But if Newcastle were desperate enough to go up to, 3/4 of the buyout clause and show Sevilla a profit of about 40 million, then they are a club. They're not what we've termed a selling club, because I think that's a pejorative, derogatory term. But they are a club that does business, and Monchi's scouting system is so good, they tend to have a queue of ideas coming up behind the players that you think are established and unsellable. Now seems a bizarre time to sell. There are 2 factors, one of which you've named. Yeah, if they win their game in hand, they're only going to be 2 points off Real Madrid, and they haven't won the title since, I think, 1946. So that's a huge incentive. In fact, this term they need to buy. They need to add goals to their squad rather than sell a key footballer. And secondly, knocked out of the Champions League probably is one of the things that gave Newcastle a sniff of blood, because you lose so much money by not being in the elite competition. Going back to the Europa League, you might think that they go like this. And once you said that they began planning to win the Europa League the night that they got knocked out of the Champions League. And where's the final? It's in Sevilla's own stadium. So the idea of having a shot at the league between now and May and running, in theory, to the Europa League final to play in front of your own fans in your own stadium, now's not the time to sell a big asset. So unless the offering price goes up dramatically, then I think they keep their best footballers.
Graham, just before we let you go, within the 4 clubs who have gone to Saudi Arabia, has there been dissenting voices within the football clubs? Has there been anybody of note who has said this is not something that we're overly happy with, or has everybody got in line and taken the money and shut up, essentially?
Well, yeah, everybody except for Raul Garcia, a former Atletico player, current Athletic Club player. He plays off the strike force, wily, tough, dangerous attacking midfielder, second striker, and he launched into one. And listen, I understand that when money talks, football listens really hard. And in a crisis, the fact that they've chosen to play outside their own country is something that traditionalists will regret. And clubs will say, look at the revenue, look at the extra money we've taken in. This keeps people in employment. I think it's a debate which is a tough one, but it's, if you look at the NFL playing in London, if you look at Italy have played the Super Cup all over the world, I think the Super Cup being played abroad is arguable. It's interesting. There's a huge atmosphere. The stadium could have held many more people, but it would have been a complete sellout apart from COVID distancing rules. So they're above 30,000 instead of above 55,000, but it would have been full last night. The noise was huge. It was a good atmosphere. Raul Garcia's version of it was, it's wrong. It's wrong to take these games away from our fans. They should be played in our country. I think he will have a lot of people applauding his words. Fans, for example, last year, because of the pandemic, they played the Super Cup in this format in Seville, not in Saudi Arabia, and it was absolutely fantastic. It was exceptional. Raul Garcia is a lone voice. I'm going to add mine again. I think that playing this game in front of a regime which stands accused and I think, convicted, although not in court, of murdering a dissenter, Jamal Khashoggi in the Turkish embassy. It's wrong to be there, in my opinion. Raul Garcia's argument wasn't that. It was like, play these games in front of the fans, listen to the fans. This is a domestic opportunity for a club like Athletic to taste glory in its own country. It's a solid argument. That concept will be debated loudly, and nothing will change so long as there's so much money flooding into the coffers of the Spanish FA and then out to the clubs again.